Dallas, you got to get over to our ship. This OS that you've given us, this Glix, it sucks.
What is happening?
It killed an interview. It shot another one into the sun. She's terrible. She's useless. I think she was designed by Bill Gates.
John, do not overlay your inability to do things in a proper fashion on me. You're the one who executed action 76789 rather than 76788A.
All right, hold on. Both of you calm down. I'm coming over to the ship.
Come here, Johnny. What? I want to show you something. I want to show you something.
I'm sitting here chatting. That ain't good enough for me. Listen real close.
Hey, what you saying?
The only thing left on the mic is listening. Wait a minute. Made to be enjoyed at the maximum.
Hello, devoted geeks. Welcome to Comm Talk, the podcast essentially Geek Devotions. I'm Dallas, and this is episode 93 of Comm Talk. And just decided to broadcast. We're having a little team meeting here with our away team, Primitive Rhythm Machine, hosted by Steve MacDonald. Steve, say hi.
Hi, Steve. Hi, guys.
And
we can
then
edit that post.
we can edit a post. And then John Harju. What's going on, man?
I hate Glix. I hate her. She sucks.
I love Glix. I love Glix.
Glix is not a terrible AI. She's done well for. She's a little sassy. What's the problem, man?
She
Sassy
destroys.
but classy is what I say.
She destroys our work.
She destroys your work.
It's like a fax machine that shreds.
Well, I mean, if you hit the
You like
wrong
guitars?
button,
Shred?
Glix is telling me you're hitting the wrong buttons is the problem.
I'm saying if Glix actually was artificial intelligence, she would know what she's supposed to do.
There's no replacement for you doing the right thing on the front end.
You know what? I did the right thing on the front end. We had some band interviews. We had some conversation. We've lost 2 interviews to her so far. 2, Dale Thompson and Brutality. Both gone forever in the ether of time.
And who are these guys again?
Bands.
They're bands?
Well, Dale Thompson was the lead singer of Bride.
Right.
You know. And then Brutality, new band that just came out with an album this last year.
Yeah.
Worldwide Desolation. Phenomenal album. Had interviews with both of them. Glix was like, nope, don't want that. Delete.
But maybe Glix knows that we can do better, and she's urging us on to greater things.
Or maybe Glix is just a terrible AI to begin with.
I'll let me look into the programming and see if there's some cookies. Maybe we can recover your files. But like, why these bands? Like, what drew you to talk about these bands in the first place?
I mean, they're good bands.
They're good bands.
Yeah, Bride has been around since the 80s. They started as Matrix back in the early 80s, and then they morphed into more of a heavy metal band for about 3 albums, and then they got a little bit mellower. They had more of a Guns N' Roses type of a sound. People would equate them with. And he's been recording ever since then. In fact, he has like 10, I'm not even kidding, 10 different things going on right now where people will send him music. He'll put the words to it, and they put out albums, and he's the singer. I'm serious. There's like 10 of them.
That's crazy.
I contacted him through Facebook for another project that's sort of still in the it's almost ready. It's getting there, and I needed music for it, and I asked him if I could borrow a couple of songs. And he said, you know what? Use any of my music, the hundreds of songs that he's put out in the last 40 years. He said, use it for God's glory.
Nice. So, that's pretty cool.
Sort of chopping up my favorite songs and using elements of it and storytelling and stuff like that. So he's a very generous guy.
Well, that's cool. Well, let me ask you guys this. This brings up an interesting conversation, and that's this: like, what draws us to different types of Christian music? Like, you guys are super talented. I've liked Christian music for a long time. Like, what's your go-to music, and why is that your thing? Maybe we can work out a deal with Glix so we can, maybe she just didn't like your music. Maybe that's what it was. So John, how about you, man? What's your go-to? Like, what's your go-to style of Christian music, and why?
That's gosh, that's a hard question for me. It like legit is, because it's coming up as a teenager. There was a time in my life where I was like, had the mentality of, if it ain't metal, it ain't nothing. There was a different word I would use because I wasn't really a Christian as a teenager, but basically it was death to all that's not metal. It was my mentality back in the day, but growing up and mellowing out a little bit, I've kind of found something in every genre that I dig. So, I mean, to ask me what my go-to is, it's kind of like, well, what day is it? Because so it varies. And I mean, lately in the morning, I've been listening to a lot of a band called Ghost Ship.
Ghost Ship?
Yeah. And then when I get out of my morning mode, there's a specific band, and I'm trying to remember their name. They're a band from Brazil that I've really been getting into, called, I'm going to try to say this. Death metal bands always have odd names. Adventunum?
Adventunum?
Yeah, Adventunum.
Wow.
They have a 3-song EP that they put out in 2019 called Sophism, and that's just delicious goodness.
Right. Now, is that in English? Or is that in Portuguese?
No, it's in English.
Oh, cool. I thought you were just really multilingual, and I didn't know that. I thought I learned something new about you.
No, and 2 other bands I discovered recently that I've been really binging on. Steve taught me how to say this band's name correctly. Renascent.
Renascent.
Yeah, they're a Finnish blackened death metal band that has moved to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Renascent. Renascent.
And then what was that third band from Malaysia, Steve? Do you remember? We're geeking out about them quite a bit.
Man. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
Pop quiz. Name them all now.
Yeah, and I can't search because my phone is being used for Skype, and I don't want to touch it because...
Give me a second, because I did order their physical media, because that's what I live on.
Right.
And I have a receipt in my email.
That's a good
thing. I feel terrible saying I promote these bands and then be like, I don't remember their name. Shamash. Shamash.
Oh, wow.
And they're from Malaysia. They have a new album out called The Suffering Servant. And the most recent album from Renascent that I had ordered was Praise the Lord God Almighty.
And Brutality is, I wanted to throw that in too. I mean, their new album is fantastic. They've been putting out EPs and stuff like that for the last 3 years, maybe 4 years.
Right.
And they repackaged some of the material from that, and then they put out some brand new stuff and put out a fantastic album. It's just one of those albums that sort of flows into the next song, and it makes this, like, if you listen to it all together, it makes a bigger experience than just listening to the individuals. I mean, some people say, it's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
These type of albums are, because of that flow. Where you can take one song out, you can take all the songs out, and then you put them together, and it sort of makes the puzzle. And it's really one of those types of albums. That's really
right. So, like, what draws you to these? Like, is it the lyric base that draws you to it? Is it just you just like that style? Like,
well, listeners who are going to follow along with the bands that I just kind of scattershotted out there, they're
Right.
going to notice a quick disconnect between the first band I mentioned and all the rest of them. Ghost Ship is very much kind of like a almost country-esque band.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, their lead singer's voice reminds me of you, Dallas. I don't know why.
I don't
but-
sing, so.
The
Wow.
mellifluous tones of Dallas Morrow.
But for me, I mean, I mentioned this on our show, especially in the episode coming up where we were supposed to have a brutality interview, Glix.
John, dear, stop blaming me. That was you.
Anyway, in the next episode, I do mention that I listen to music a little bit different than a lot of people in that I listen to music in pictures. Like when I hear music, it elicits images in my head. So I mean, I'm just drawn to music that takes me to places I want to be, basically, if that makes sense. Ghost Ship is really good morning music for me because how my morning ritual starts out. First thing I do every morning is I listen to Alistair Begg. That kind of aligns my brain a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can't go wrong with Alistair Begg.
And
He's
then
pretty lit.
And then to kind of keep that going, I've been throwing on some Ghost Ship, which is a band from my state of Washington. Hooray!
Really?
Yeah. And actually, I have a funny story about them, but let me finish answering your question. So I like to put them on because musically it's a little bit mellow. I don't like to listen to the heavy stuff super early in the morning because it just gets me aggro. And outside of the acoustic presentation that they have, because they like to use a lot of country style instruments, a lot of acoustic guitars, dobros, lap steel, banjos.
That's quite the mix of instruments that's going on there.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Like country metal?
No, it's not even metal. It's just country. A lot of people think they're metal just because of the name of the band, Ghost Ship. But no, it's
a country feel to
it. It legit is kind of like it's like country. I don't want to say rock because that implies a certain heaviness, but they're not pop. Like think modernized Marshall Tucker, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's good stuff. But outside of the instrumentation that goes with it, I really like the lyrics. The lyrics, lyrically speaking, they have a super solid biblical foundation that I think exceeds what you hear on standard Christian radio. Now, I'm not a big fan of standard Christian radio as it is because I think a lot of stuff that gets put on there is intentionally watered down to get radio play.
When we say watered down, what do you mean by that?
I mean, I hear back in the day, I heard pastors refer to what they would call hymn bands.
Okay.
And I'm saying hymn as an H-I-M, not H-Y-M-N. And these are bands that will, instead of saying Jesus or God, they just say him or you. So it's not so direct as far as what they're talking about. So there's a lot of hymn bands on there, or there's the people who take the other route who just are like, we're just going to be a worship band. We're not going to talk about
issues,
things. You know, we're just here to worship.
So your thing is more bands that they're not just singing just blind songs, but they're singing like it's a mixture of worship, but dealing with issues from a Christian worldview, but it being very clear.
I like things that are bluntly intentional, if that makes sense. That feels like they have a reason for what they're doing other than to make money.
Right. I can understand that.
So, that's kind of where I'm at. And like with Ghost Ship, the reason what really draws me into them, like they're on their first album, the first song on it is a song called Mediator. And it's so scripturally founded. Like, if I wanted to, I could literally find the spot in the Bible and said, this is what they're quoting. Like, the chorus, part of the chorus goes, there is only one God, there is only one mediator standing in for us. I can't remember the rest of it off the top of my head.
Right.
I'm a guitar player, not a singer. I'm not supposed to remember lyrics. But I mean, I mean, and I know as soon as I said that, I watched your face perk up, and you're like, I know that verse, and I'm gonna look for it now. So something that's super scripturally founded, but in the same sense, it's not like turn or burn stuff.
Right.
The first song on their second album, Costly, or actually I should say third album, because they had an EP before they got signed to BEC Records. So. Which is really hard to find. Don't go looking for it. I got one, and I'm not sharing. But on the first song on their album, Costly, is it basically the entire song is just an invitation to come know Jesus, is all it is.
Love that.
And so it's not worship. It's not beat you down with lyrics, but it also, it's not, he, you, or whatever, or songs that talk about how God makes me feel. It's this, let me show you something. So I dig that. And as far as the other metal bands, part of it has to do with what I was saying lyrically, with the being very direct. I mean, it's not often you find even Christian metal bands that have albums called Praise the Lord God Almighty. You know what I mean? Or The Suffering Servant, which is a direct reference to the Old Testament prophecies of the coming of the Messiah. So they're very direct in what they say, but they're a little bit more intense about it. They like to add the drama and the showmanship to it, so that's good stuff. Oh, and another band that both Steve and I had been listening to recently too, just throwing this out there as well, because I was just thinking about that one Malaysian band, Shamash, and I'm like, oh, there's another band from that area of the world that Steve and I have been listening to, Kekel.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're a band that's been out for a long time from Indonesia.
Kekal.
Kekal, and they ran the gamut of all types of genres as they've been out. So if you don't like one album, go to the next one, because it's probably going to be something different.
They have like 10 albums too, so it's right.
Very cool.
I guess with me, I like different stuff in different ways. Songs to me are sort of like you open up a present and see what's inside there. And sometimes it can be something where, this song is reminiscent of a song that I've heard before.
Right.
And that can be nice because it's so, it's homey. It's like, okay, this is another little thing that I can put with those things that I already have, and add to that bunch. And then sometimes you open up a present and you're like, what is this? And you have to figure it out. And sometimes songs are like that as well, where you just, there's a little bit, it can be lyrically, I like songs with a lot of metaphor. With the list that I made for the other show, a lot of the songs that are represented there are metaphors. And even if it's a straight ahead story, there's a metaphor for something in it, usually. I mean, good stories have a theme, and sometimes the theme isn't right in your face.
Right.
A New Hope. It's like, what is this movie about? But things like that, where it's a little puzzle, and your brain can listen to the song, 5 or 6 times, and then you're like, and all of a sudden you can listen to it on a different level.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love songs with spiritual truths. There's a beautiful song called "Rescue the Perishing" by Billy somebody. Can't remember his last name.
Billy Ocean.
No, not Billy Ocean. Rescue the Perishing, which it's calling the Christian church to go and there's the mission field. It's white for reaping. Go and get it. Stuff like that. Songs like forget the name of it, but it quotes an entire Bible passage. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and it's by Pep Squad. You know, and it's not, they're like this like you know, post-punk type of a feel, you know, 90s rock type of a band, and then you get this mellow song and you're like, what's this song going to be about? And it's just
Right.
straight scripture quote, and it's
Wow.
absolutely beautiful. And you can, you know, it's like on your deathbed you want to have that song going on, because it's just, you know, you want that song to be there, because if it's not, as a Christian, you're going to feel really bad,
Right.
because you know, if you haven't fought the good fight, you haven't finished the race. I love songs that you know, that just give my mind more ammunition when I'm talking to someone else. With deliverance, you know, they have a lot of really good scriptural songs where, you know, the weapons of your warfare aren't carnal, and you know, it's tearing down the strongholds, tearing down the vain imagines of every high thing that dares exalt itself against the knowledge of God.
Right.
I know that scripture because I know that song. You know? And
That's good.
when bands, I know it's fantastic. And when bands find those little parts of the Bible that are invisible, and all of a sudden they pull them out and they make a song out of it,
Right.
and all of a sudden you understand something much deeper about this stuff. You know, with musical styles, when I was growing up, it was sort of, you know, my mom had black gospel and she had The Sound of Music. And that was pretty much what we listened to. My dad played classical music, so I grew up listening to that. Unfortunately, he played that when I was going to bed. So a lot of times when I'm listening to classical music, I start to doze off because that was his intention. But just the majesty of it, the wonderfulness of it, especially the Baroque period for me.
Right.
And, you know, seeing those elements played out in other songs as well. Orchestral metal, you know, things like that, or industrial metal, when it's taking elements from all different types of other musical forms. You know, there's one that just has like this jazzy piano and jazzy drums in the middle of it, and you know, it fits into the song, but the entire rest of the song is just this heavy metal onslaught with this industrial beat going, and it breaks down into this little thing, and it's like I said, you're unwrapping it and you're like, what's going to be in here?
That's so cool.
So, you know, with me growing up, I had a lot of that rock and roll going into it, because up in Boston here, there's very little on the radio in the 80s except for rock and roll, but we had these alternative radio stations, and I started to get friends who were digging the alternative stuff, and then I started to understand alternative rock and roll, like the you know, the new British invasion of rock and roll with, you know, the Cure and the you know, bands coming out of there. Name almost anything. But you know, Duran Duran for pop, and you know, all these different other elements coming in, and you know, when I think about Christian music at that time, as good as it was, it's like, I was talking to my wife about this. She doesn't really like a lot of alternative stuff from the 80s that was Christian, but she likes a lot of the stuff that's secular. And I'm like, what's the difference? What was the real big difference?
Right.
And very, very little was coming out of Great Britain in the Christian sphere. And it was amazingly tons of it in the secular sphere. So you have all that, and I think that's unconsciously, maybe that's what her brain is getting into, is the Britishness of it. And you know, she just doesn't get into that, the American stuff. It's very hard for me to find a song from the 80s that's a Christian song that she would like, probably because of that. And listening to music so much, you get to hear it on a different level. You know, it's like it starts to tease out, and then you can sort of see how things like that happen.
Right.
And that's one of the beauties of music to me, is when you can start to get that on a different level.
Yeah.
You know, I think John he's in a band. He's doing stuff. He's thinking musically. He's doing all that stuff. And when you do that, it helps your brain start to slice that music thinner, and then you can start to really see what's in there. So that's me. But with growing up with different musical styles, I didn't get into country because there wasn't a lot of country up here until Johnny Cash's American Recordings album, and all of a sudden that started to pop for me. I don't get into a lot of country. In fact, most of it's just the Johnny Cash style. But I started to appreciate disco. I started to appreciate soul and funk, blues and jazz and stuff like that. And just by continuing to listen to music and listen to bands that incorporate those sounds into their music, and then it makes it easier for you to access it mentally.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And we're going to come back, and I'll talk about some of my stuff with music. And then I also want to, on the back end of this conversation, I want to talk about what's the best resources you guys can put out there for people to find music in the genres that they like that's drawing them to. And so we're going through the commercial break, and I'm going to talk so that these guys have time to think, because these guys have so many resources, and they're just like, I've sent people their way, or I've asked these guys questions because I know people are looking for stuff in a genre that they like. So we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Hey y'all, my name's The Keeper. I have been told that I'm something of what they call a Q-type character in this show called Playing Games with Strangers. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, given the implications of who this Q is on this fangled Star Trek or whatever it's called. But anyway, I recommend heading on over to Playing Games with Strangers and listening to an episode or two, and possibly letting them know that no, he's not Q. He is a benevolent, all-knowing creature who just happened to put somebody in the wrong timeline. Anyway, I'll see y'all then. Thanks for listening.
All right, so I want to encourage you guys, please go check out the people we just promoted here. Why? Because you're listening to them right now. That's right. That was Playing Games with Strangers, and that Keeper guy is an interesting individual. What do you think of him, John?
All right. As far as the character's concerned, I love the character. Little known fact, I hate that commercial. I have been begging somebody else on our staff to make a new commercial for you guys. Literally begging, and nobody stepped up. And every time I hear it, I'm just like, this is so bad.
I'm stepping up.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, I mean, maybe one of our viewers who's listening right now, you're talented. You're like, you know what? Let me contact John and see if I can make one for these guys. How can they contact you, John, so they can do that?
Oh, but I have stranger danger. Let me, if you go to our website, playinggameswithstrangers.com, there's a contact section in there. Send us an email that way.
Do it.
It goes to all of us.
Very
and
good.
the people, because we actually, I'm kind of the face of Playing Games with Strangers because I'm the DM, but I mean, it really is a team effort. And so we function as staff for that show. So whoever is responsible for that will be the person that will respond to that.
I dig it. All right, so we've heard from John and we heard from Steve about their music they're drawn to, and now I guess it's my turn to talk about this, and hopefully Glix doesn't jettison my likes out the window.
I was just about to say the same thing. He's your boss, Glix. Make sure you don't delete this one, you sack of screws.
Keep it up, cue ball, and I'll jettison you into the deserts of the planet geekdom.
Cue ball. Who's talking?
Okay, let's calm down, everybody. All right, so for me, for my music, first off, with Christian music, I want you guys to understand that I didn't grow up necessarily Christian. And so growing up, my music base was I didn't really listen to Christian music as a child until I was probably 15 years old. But I did grow up with a variety of music. My mom was very intentional about exposing me to an eclectic mix of it. But what I listened to a lot of was I listened to a lot of quote unquote oldies. Sorry, Steve. But
So the early '90s, basically.
but I listened to a lot of Motown, a
Nice.
lot of the British invasion, the Beatles and whatnot. A lot of the stuff we had on the channel, it was 95.7, and it was basically music from the 60s and 70s. But I leaned also into a lot of earlier music. I loved music from the 50s and from the 40s. I loved swing music, and
Oh yeah.
I loved ragtime. The artistry behind ragtime is absolutely beautiful, because of the way that you got one hand doing the exact opposite of what the other hand's doing to create this beautiful melody. And so for me, music was all about technicality, a lot of it. And then growing out of that, I just didn't get into the music in the 90s. I just could not do it. For some reason, my friends were rocking out to all kinds of cats, and I was just like, it just wasn't my thing at the time for some reason. I've grown to have some appreciation for some of the 90s music later. But when I became a Christian back in 99, I was convicted about what I listened to and what I allowed it. Music was such a big part of my life, and I was starting to listen to more modern music at the time, but I was beginning to realize it wasn't good for me. like just the amount that I was ingesting. Like I was listening to a lot of like Snoop, Dre, Rob Zombie, just an eclectic mix of individuals who had music that their lyric bases weren't edifying to my spirit, especially at the time that I was going through. Some of the rock music I listened to was more just because I was angry and it was angry music, and so it's like yeah, and just what it was. But I was convicted by that, so I went on a hunt to find music that was lyrically encouraging to me. But I kind of like John. I just didn't want just like, oh, we love Jesus. For me, I like to. I'm not necessarily a deep thinker, but I like to think that I like some substance to what I listen to. So I really leaned into a lot of stuff that had a lyric base that pointed people back to the scriptures, and it was real clear. This is a Christian message. So fun story. I remember when I made this determination. This is kind of my mindset. At the time, POD was a big deal. Or as one of my youth leaders, have you heard of this band called Pod? I was like, oh, Jesus.
It hurts my soul.
But POD was a big deal, and I remember hearing it at other youth groups I would visit. I went to youth camp, and they were playing some POD music, and so I was like, let me check this out. And so I bought Fundamentals of Southtown, and remember listening to it. I'm going, this is okay, but
Please excuse my interruption. Stephen, we have a ping in the funk sector of the planet Geekery. I need you to head out and retrieve any data before the signal is lost.
All right, cool. Hey, Steve, appreciate you, man, and I hope you have a blessed day, and good luck out there in the musical wilderness of the planet Geekdom.
You too. God bless you guys.
God bless you, man. So anyways, like I said, I'm reading these, I'm looking at it, and my mom had taught me at an early age to read the lyrics. Like I loved getting the hard copies and opening the book and reading the lyrics of the songs. And the music was interesting and was good, but for me, at the season I was in, I just couldn't see Jesus within the lyric base. Not that they need to say Jesus every 30 seconds, but I just couldn't see it. So I started doing more digging, and I found some other stuff. I remember I found an album by a band called Disciple, which was a Christian rock band. And
Still are.
yeah, still are. They're still putting out music, which is amazing to me, because it seems like Christian music, the longevity of Christian bands is pretty nil for some reason. So I opened up the book, and I realized that every lyric had a scriptural basis. Like they're like in the pamphlet there's like brackets, and there's the scripture address for you to go read the basis for what they were saying. And for me, that blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, I think this is what I'm looking for, because it didn't sound cheesy to me. Like, unfortunately, a lot of Christian music just sounded cheesy at times. But these guys are like, we're going to give you legitimate lyrical bases, and then we're going to give you some quality sounds to listen to. And so that kind of started my journey of like, let me find Christian music that was a little bit deeper and a little bit more to it. And so that kind of became my thing for a long while. I fell in love with groups like Hazakim, which was a Christian hip hop band. Still is great group of guys. They're brothers, and their lyric bases they're deep. They have a clear message of who Christ is. They bring in a theological conversation. My first album of them came out in 2009. It was called Theophanies, which Theophanies is a theological term means to experience God, have an encounter with God himself. And the whole purpose of the album was to point out the fact that God himself had presented himself to people in the past. These guys are Messianic Jews. One of the biggest arguments against Christianity and the claims of Christ, if Jesus is the Mashiach, but he's also God, then how could man stand before him? There's the verse of no man can stand before God and live. And so the whole album was like, let me tell you about the theophanies, these moments where people experienced God. And so the entire album is going through account after account of people seeing God, experiencing God, and the life-changing effect of experiencing God. And I just love that. I love when artists are able to put some thought into their lyrics and express their faith, and even teach people a little bit more about what we believe and why we believe it. And that's a big deal for me, is explain to people what we believe and why it's a belief that we have as Christians. And if you guys have been listening to Geek Devotions for a long time or anything, you guys kind of catch that. Like, I go out of my way to explain stuff because I want you to understand why we're doing what we do. But then also, because of the eclectic music background I have, I love having different sounds. Like, if I listen to the same thing over and over, I get headaches. And so I need a change up in the sounds I'm listening to. So Theophanies was a great album, because not just because of the lyric base, but the styles within the hip hop were different. They integrated cultural sounds. They have a song called Exodus 3, where they're bringing in these traditional Middle Eastern sounds into the album, and it creates a beautiful soundscape as they present the story that takes place in Exodus chapter 3. And then during the commercial break, I pulled out my hard drive because I had to pull up a band I was looking for. But basically, when I was in college, I was on a one-man mission to find every style of music in a Christian format, because a lot of people, their mindset was Christian music can only be this. And then John kind of pointed out, you got the hymn bands where there was just, it's all about him, and like, but it was always like one genre. Like, to present Christ in a genre of music outside of traditional, K-Love, Air One music was kind of taboo, at least back in the 2000s when I first came into Christianity. And if you were doing anything else, it wasn't good. Like, it was just cheesy. Mm-hmm. But I needed different sounds. I needed different things because of the way I grew up living. And so I started finding different genres of music, and it became a passion of mine. I found a Christian Japanese rock band. Specifically, it's called Visual Kai, and it's called Gagaling. And loved them. They were absolutely wild. The way that their music videos were, and the music just was driving me. It was just good. There's a Dominican Latino artist named Juan Luis Gorria, and and most of his stuff is instrumental, but he has this Dominican, Latino, Caribbean stuff, mixed fusion coming together. And so there are days like, again, I have my knowledge of Spanish is little. So,
Poquito.
muy poquito. It's a little better than some, but it's very little. So, but for me, first off, when I find these bands that are from a foreign country, I do my diligence to look at the lyrics and understand what they're saying before I just go, yeah, we're just gonna put this on repeat. That's partially why I stopped listening to Rammstein actually as a child, is because I did that. But I just love the different sounds. I love when there's different things that come about. And then there's also songs and bands that just hit me just right. There was a band, and John, you might remember them, Jonah 33. Did you ever listen to those guys?
Did I listen to them? No. Do I remember them? Yes.
Okay. Were they not your thing?
Again, it depends on the time period, because there was a point in my life where I had a very death to all that's not metal attitude about music. So
I get that. They were not a heavy metal band. They were a Christian rock band. But they had this song called Faith Like That. And that song challenged me deeply. Like I have cried listening to this song at times in my life. Because it's going through talking about just wanting to have a faith to see certain things happen. And the chorus goes, I want a faith like that, to see the dead rise, to see you pass by. Oh, I want a faith like that. Whatever the cost, I'll suffer the loss. Oh, I want a faith like that. And the whole song is talking about, like, I want a faith just to see you move, God, to see you do something powerful in my life, but not just me, in the world around me. And it's not a matter of looking for miracles. It actually says that in the next line. I'm not looking for miracles, signs and wonders, or things thereof. I caught a glimpse of what you want from me, and what I have is not enough. And that's that whole pull of me as a individual, as a Christian. I remember when I first heard the song and it just smacked me in the chest like a freight truck. I was wondering if I was doing enough. If I was really living the life that Christ wanted me to live. And it challenged me to go, I need to step up. This is a legitimate prayer that I had for me, for my life at the time, is to see God rise and to do something greater and to be what he's calling me to be. I really believe there's a lot of people that we go through these seasons where we're not what God called us to be. We're not living the life that he wants for us. We're not being who God created us to be. And he's calling us to do these things. And that song really stirred me in a season of my life to go, I can be better. And I should be better. And I started to work things out. So that's kind of me. That's my mindset of music, was obviously the wide range of music, of styles, and especially when you're mixing styles. And I don't want to go. I can go for days talking about all the stuff I have. Like on my hard drive, I have some Christian jazz, hip hop, gothic, gospel. I got some folk music. I got some blues music. I got some Celtic music, brother.
You dropped the word gothic. I'm trying to picture you with the corpse paint on, the black eyeliner.
I did used to wear black nail polish.
I did too.
So that was a thing I did. But
I used to dye my hair black. I used to wear the black nail polish. I had chains hanging off of everything.
That's crazy. I could see you doing that. Not gonna lie. So here's a question for you, John. In your desire to hear music, because you're passionate about music, and to find music in a Christian format, not just we're singing about Jesus, but it's legitimately like the heart cry of God at times. How do you find music? Because you mentioned bands I've never heard of. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, I know you're in the music industry, but how do you recommend people find music?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? I have a lot of people actually ask me, how do you find all these bands I've never heard of? And I'm like, I just do. There's not a specific way. It's not like I literally go out looking for them. They just kind of attract themselves to me. But during the whole entire time while you were talking, I was trying to, because you had prefaced you had told us during the commercial break that you were going to ask this question. I've been scrambling to come up with a cogent answer, because nobody likes it when you're like, I don't have a way. I do voices, everybody. I apologize when, like, that's my I'm an idiot voice. So, basically how the process kind of starts. If I'm looking for something, I'll take a band that I like,
Mm-hmm.
that I know that I like. I start with the known.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will go look up the record label that they're on.
Nice.
You've heard the phrase "birds of a feather flock together."
Yeah.
Record labels are the same way. If they have a band of one type, they usually exist specifically within that genre, unless you're getting into the uber major labels like Columbia or
Sony
or something like that, and then they're just a giant conglomerate of whatever makes money.
Right.
But typically in the Christian world, it's going to be by record label.
Mm.
So I'll look up their record label and I'll see what other bands are on that record label, and I'll check them out. Sometimes I'll start with a genre that I dig. For me, the hardest one for me to find bands in, that it took me a while to find bands in that I dig. And this is gonna sound weird. I had to mention this in the next episode of Primitive Rhythm Machine, because genres are named without regard to bands that are in it. So, disclaimer aside, stoner metal.
Oh.
That's a subgenre of metal you would associate with bands like Black Sabbath, or if you're familiar with more modern bands like Sleep, or what was Phil Anselmo's Down, bands like that. So I had to do a lot of searching, but I just kind of kept going online and kind of rephrasing the search, like Christian stoner metal bands, or Christian band that sounds like Blur,
Right.
Stuff like that. And there's a lot of forums online as well that you can pop on and say, hey, I'm looking for a band. I'm looking for a band that sounds like this.
Right.
And that's something else I want to put out there too for people who are listening. When people are just like, oh, I can't get into Christian music because I'm really into insert your favorite secular band here.
Right.
If there was only a band that sounded just like insert favorite secular band here, I would totally be into Christian music. I'm going to tell you that's not true.
Right.
Because the moment you find a Christian band that sounds exactly like your favorite secular band, your first reaction is to be like, oh, they're just a giant knockoff of your insert favorite secular band.
Mm-hmm.
So really what you want to look for something that's similar to, but doesn't sound exact.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who would be like, who back in the day that were just like, do you know any bands that sound exactly like Metallica? And there was a band at the time called Eternal Decision that literally sounded exactly like Metallica, but it was unsatisfying to them because it wasn't Metallica.
Mm.
So much in the same way that, non-alcoholic beer is unsatisfying to people who drink beer because it's not beer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just kind of one of those catch-22s. Just throwing that out there. So the internet is your friend. And if you know of a band that if you have a starting point, you want to utilize that starting point to the best of your ability,
Right.
and jump on record labels, find online Christian record stores, or CD stores. I call them record stores, but CD stores, music stores, stuff like that. A lot of them will have like, here, listen to a track from this album. I go on to these stores and I'll just cruise through there and be like, hey, I've never heard this band. Let me poke at that for a while.
Right.
And just lately, I've been getting into Spotify. I'm not a huge fan of Spotify myself because I am a musician.
Right.
And the whole streaming music business is very unfair to the musicians in that part of the business. So I don't want to advocate for it, but I'm also might be a youth pastor. I don't know. I'm in limbo. But from a spiritual leadership perspective, I know that people are out there who do need a shift. And if Spotify's their link to music, I'll say, go on to Spotify, start with a Christian band you like. Underneath at the bottom of the listing on there is going to say, hey, if you like this, check out these bands.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
you gotta be careful sometimes, because sometimes like, oh, check out this band. You're like, this is not Christian.
This is true. I mean, obviously,
you gotta do your diligence.
You got to do your diligence, and that's one thing that I always advocate to anybody that is a Christian is develop discernment. You don't want to you don't want to do something or not do something just because somebody tells you to, but develop your own discernment. Exactly. and base it off of the Word of God, because if you are able to think for yourself, you're going to be more productive as a Christian than somebody who constantly has to take orders from somebody.
Right. And I think that's a key word right there is you need to have discernment with what you listen to. There are bands that were like, they came out as Christian and maybe not so much. And, a classic example, I say classic, you have Katy Perry, who, when she started her music career, was a Christian artist and went by a different name than Katy Perry. And now what people say, I haven't done enough looking into it, but people say this when she started off, it was just to get her foot in the career so she can kick off and do whatever she does now. I don't know her personally. I didn't listen to her music before she was Katy Perry, so I couldn't tell you otherwise. But there are individuals who they're just in it just to make money, just to get their foot in the door, because sometimes getting into Christian music is easier than to get into a major label. And so you need to have discernment about who you listen to and what they're saying. And then even look at, like, because reality is within Christianity, we have a lot of almost subgenres, people with theological mindsets. And some people's theological mindset is not appropriate. And it's very anti-biblical. So you have to navigate some of that stuff. I'll say this one more thing about discernment. There was a band that I was really into for a while because it was unique, because I couldn't find anybody else who was doing what they did. And years later, I found them. I looked into them again, and they got off the deep end. They had really started putting out some inappropriate stuff, and their vocabulary was really inappropriate. I was like, I can't listen to these guys right now anymore.
I'm curious as to what band you're talking about now.
It was Savior Machine.
What's wrong with Savior Machine?
Have you looked into them lately?
They're not a band anymore.
Exactly. I wanted to find some of their writings later, and the lead singer, like, he's just F-bomb at this, F-bomb that, and just some really just kind of messed up stuff he did later.
Musically, I can't fault the band on their recordings. So I mean,
musically, yeah, but I mean, again, it's if they were to continue doing some stuff, you'd be like, you know what I'm saying?
Nah, well, I don't know. I'm weird. I separate the artist from the music. So, because I'm a musician and I also know how I am in my personal life. And it's just like, I tend to not put people on pedestals and be like, these are the spiritual pinnacle. But again, that's personal discernment. So, I mean, what,
and that is a thing.
Yep. It's eating meat sacrificed to idols.
Yeah, I'll give you that. And again, it's a matter of you personally going, okay, what is this or that? Like, I know some people who will not listen to Brian Welch at all, even though he's a professed Christian, but because he still plays with his band Korn, people are like, I just can't do it. And I'm like, I've listened to his interviews, I've listened to the guy talk, and I mean, he's legitimately repentant, and he does not play certain songs whatsoever. Like, he's made like, the band may play it, but he won't.
Read his book. I've read his book.
Right.
And there's another thing that I want to put out there too, is that when you're using your discernment, once you find a band that you dig, continue to use discernment with them as they put out albums. There was a band that I was super into, and they seemed very philosophically sound, and I was super into them. But things started to get kind of like a funny aftertaste after a while, and then I kind of found out their lead singer kind of started slipping into universalism. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to jump off this train now.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
And also, just I mentioned it earlier, a couple seconds ago, but don't put your bands and the people in these bands on spiritual pedestals.
Yeah.
They are just people, and they will make mistakes, and we need to have as much grace with them as we have with anybody else. and I'm saying this from a personal perspective too.
Yeah.
I am in a band, and people are imperfect. I try to be better. I'm not
Yeah.
great all the time, so
Sure.
you kind of have to expect that too. The only difference is they have a bigger spotlight put on them, so more people can see them when they screw up.
Right. I think the difference is, I agree with you. What you're saying is we need to not put them on things, but in our spiritual discernment, go, okay, we're going to take a pause for certain things. If we treated King David, the way that we treat modern bands and just modern people, period.
Mhm.
They have one screw up, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, we're going to erase the entire discography that never happened. We're going to go ahead and pretend like they were never maybe the pastor of your church, or they were never part of your life. If we treated King David that way, he wouldn't have been in the Bible.
Exactly.
It's like we said, eat the bones. I mean, eat the meat, spit out the bones. But again, that's part of the discernment stuff. But also knowing what's like what you can and can't handle with certain things. Yeah. Well, speaking of Spotify, I want to encourage. This is what we're gonna do. I'm giving you homework, and I'm gonna make sure Glix sends a message to Steve. The bands that we've mentioned today.
Make sure you don't delete that message, Glix.
Don't worry, John. I have this.
I want you guys to send me some Spotify links of some of the stuff that you guys have mentioned. I'm gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna put together a Spotify playlist. And it's going to be in the show notes of this video of this episode for you guys to check out these bands, to check out who we're talking about, some of the people that we enjoy listening to, and some songs perhaps that we're like, man, this is really good, and we think it will encourage you. And so, but yeah, that's what we got. I don't think there's anything else to add to the conversation today. You got anything else, John?
Yeah. So are we going to reformat the hard drive in our ship here to wipe out Glix?
No, she's gonna stay on your ship, buddy. She's got eyes everywhere. Plus,
what are you doing, Hal?
She's the one that knows how to use the impossibility drive. So, yeah. If you ever want to go home again, possibly. All right. Well, John, how can people reach out to you and connect with Playing Games with Strangers?
Oh, to reach out to me directly is a bit of a task and a half because I'm a super private individual on the interwebs.
Right.
But if you absolutely need to, you can, like I said, you can locate me through the Playing Games with Strangers links on Facebook, as well as going to our website, playinggameswithstrangers.com.
Right.
And we have contact methods there as well to email us. Yeah. So yeah, Playing Games with Strangers, and if you're going to go looking for my band, we don't have a web presence yet. So, and I'm sure I'll probably mention something on Primitive Rhythm Machine when we do. So,
right. Love it. All right. Well, guys, I want to encourage you guys, please check out Playing Games with Strangers. John and Steve are doing a great job here with Primitive Rhythm Machine. I appreciate them being part of the Comm Talk network. I feel like that's what we need to call it, the Comm Talk network, because we got you and then we got B's Views and Reviews going on.
I've been calling it the Geek Devotions network.
The Geek Devotions network, that works too.
Before you start signing off, real quick, because he's not here, Steve would also say go check out Strangers and Aliens.
Oh yeah,
that's his podcast with Ben Avery and Evan David. And then for both Steve and I, go check out Supersonic Pod Comics. We're both voice actors there, as well as is, I almost called her Aelin, Celeste.
Yeah. So check those out, guys. Check out all our stuff, obviously. Check out Geek Devotions, geekdevotions.com. We're trying to be more regular with our website, updating it and putting stuff on there. Recently, we had an article from John about Christian music. Hopefully, we'll get one from Steve soon. And we put up an article. We did a quick review on whether or not the Zack Snyder Justice League is worth watching. So it's a spoiler-free review if you want to check that out. Of course, we have devotions come out there and the show notes for these podcasts. I want to encourage you guys to go on Apple Podcasts and leave a review, rate these podcasts. Apparently, we have a Podchaser. I didn't know that. But Geek Devotions is on Podchaser. Celeste informed me of that, so that's cool. So check out Comm Talk on Podchaser and leave a review there, because in the words of John, it's the IMDb for podcasting.
That was actually JS who said that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
No, Dave. Dave said that. So
that beautiful man.
That guy is a creative genius.
I know it. So I need to pull him into the Geek Devotions network, I guess. But check all these things out. We have a merch store where you can get a Comm Talk t-shirt. So check that out. And but I think that's all we got to say. So until next time, stay devoted. Peace and love.